Now we are going to have a discussion and conversation for about 20 minutes, and I invite another guest to this table. This is Dr. Wonjae Lee. Wonjae Lee is a journalist and an economic policy expert. He majored in economics and earned an MBA at MIT Sloan School of Management. And he writes columns for various newspapers and magazines in Korea. And he is the founder of the Lab 2050, and he's going to lead the next sessions today. So please share your impression of listening to two keynote speeches and ask them if you have any questions, please. Wonjae.
Thank you for the kind introduction. My name is Wonjae Lee from Lab 2050, and I'm very much enjoyed and I'm very much impressed by the two keynote speeches. And you know what? I just ran into my very old memory in my college days, and I've been thinking that how we can make a difference in Korea, here in Korea, and how can we change the way it is in Korea, which is the rapidly economically developed country in last decades. And my memory in college days was that one time I was teaching children in a poor neighbors in Seoul in an after-school program while their parents are away working in workplaces for a long time in the evening. And then the neighbors were one day demolished completely for a development project. And I saw that those parents and children were kicked out from the town they had been living for decades. But I also saw that some people got affluent through that development project. Some people had owned land and houses in that area, even though just developers and investors took most of the profits, but some of the profits were owned by the residents themselves, even though they're not the majority of all the residents. And then after all these years, I see that people remember the money the development got to them, not the pains the development project got to them. So while seeing this, while seeing the people just remember money and still they like development projects, still in Seoul, Korea now, then I was thinking that probably people need vision. People are not like money addicted, but they just know that they need progress. They need some kind of development. It doesn't need to be just money, but they need a vision. So that's my impression. So even though we know that globalization is not for the grassroots people, and economic development is sometimes very harmful for the environment and the future generation, but still, alternatively, people need alternatives to pursue. They need kind of a goal to strive for. So that's, I think, why we are putting an emphasis on new indicator, like GPI. And I think it's very much needed in Korea right now, because in Korea, growth, this rapid economic growth is slowing down, and people are very frustrated. Inequality arises, and tension between genders and generations, it's heightened. So now people are kind of having this sentiment of, I will not have my share in the future if we are not growing any longer. So people are more like, people have more tendency to like the economic growth. So in this time, in Korea, I think we really need a new kind of vision, new kind of polarist to strive for. And we all know that it must have different values from GDP, different values from economic development as it used to be like decades ago. But still, we need kind of a one goal. So I think the indicator we like to research and persuade people to take actions for is kind of vision we will have, we just named it like the next economy, like the title of the seminar today. I don't know if this is in the old frame like Mr. Kopp mentioned. I don't know if this next economy or reimagining kind of languages can fit to the grassroots people, but I think this might be the first important step for us. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, a few questions also came to my mind when I listened to keynote speeches from you. Yeah, so we have around 15 minutes, so I'd like to briefly touch some ideas in my mind, and then you two can summarize and wrap up some of your ideas or answers. So first, even though GDP was introduced for the purpose of fighting war and plundering or exploiting rural areas, I wonder why people are so interested in it and enthusiastic about it. The next is, it's very interesting that Cliff cites the movie Avatar as an example, as he says, I understood that as the story and imagination is very important. So we are not trapped on the framing effect. So not indicator and not numbers. So Cliff also said that Helena has always emphasized that. So in my opinion, in terms of Helena's terminology, it's a big picture activism. So she emphasized, seems to be very appropriate example. So please tell me more about that. It's a question to the Helena. And another question is about Bhutan's policies related to the Gross National Happiness Index. So do you agree or do you think that the political model or policy model in Bhutan and that would be something that we can learn and follow, including political leadership, the wisdom of leaders, as you mentioned. And you emphasize the importance of politics. So what do you think about Green Party or other popular political movements or political reforms that implement such politics and policies in consideration of future generations? So please give us your thoughts or answers about some questions, and including Wanjali's comments, please. So you can do first, anyone.
It's a very interesting question why people are pursuing GDP and basically growth. But what I witnessed firsthand in Ladakh is that when you push people off the land and break down their interdependence with each other and create a total dependence on money, you create neuroses, because you're pushing people into structures over which they have almost no power. They don't know if tomorrow the price of bread will have doubled. So then naturally people want to hoard on money, and when they're told by their political leaders that the GDP is growing the economy, they believe that this is what's happening. So for me, the big picture activism now has so much to do with spelling out the truth that growth in GDP, in other words, economic growth as it's constructed now, is not actually growing the economy for anyone within the national boundaries. Governments are getting poorer, people are getting poorer. And the way we have to show that is to get people to look at how many hours do you have to work to pay for the food on the table, to pay for a roof over your head, basic needs in healthcare and education. People are working harder and harder, running faster and faster. And even within the giant corporations, people are running harder and faster to stay in place. Now, the number of people who are winning or accumulating more of this essentially fake money. We have a fake notion of growth, and then we have fake money. So there are people at the top accumulating lots of zeros after their numbers, but that wealth is not real. So the narrative needs to be to expose this emperor's clothes economy, and it needs to be getting people to actually honestly look at how and where they feel better about themselves, about the future. And what we want to really stress is that fundamental to creating a system wanting to be based on permanent war, the fundamental to this was the centralization of power that was destroying life for the majority of people. So we need to be really honest about this. And again, part of the big picture is that if we localize or decentralize, it's not possible for a community to be measuring their progress in the way that we are now allowing it to happen at the level of the nation state and globally. In a community, it wouldn't be possible to say, oh, we cut down every single tree on the mountain. Isn't that great progress? We polluted our water, so now we have to buy it in bottles. Progress. So I'm wanting to say that two of the key elements I learned from Ladakh have to do with scale. The two elements are that we need to reduce the scale of a community's impact on the natural world and on other people. It's the impact of a group on other people and on life, broadly speaking. That impact needs to be scaled down into visible, accountable units. And that scaling down is linked to more holistic knowledge. So the link between holistic and including experiential knowledge, we have demonized, and as part of this whole process of progress, experiential knowledge has been relegated to anecdotal meaninglessness. It's just like healthy life has and health has. It is truly mad what's been happening. And it's really mad that so many people are still going along with this. But the key that I'm witnessing of the importance of reducing the scale while rebuilding the connections between people, the community building, to start looking at how do we create new economies at the local level. We are seeing the benefits of that, and we are proving that small diversified farms produce far more food per unit of land and water than giant farms do. So this is why decentralization or localization really is essential to return to sanity, to return to relegating experiential knowledge to a rightful place because it's more whole and embodied. The over-specialization through modern education, the separation from nature into larger and larger scale units, those are the key elements that I believe we need to be looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Cliff? Yeah, just a quick, simple question. How do you think about the Bhutan's policies, politics? You emphasize the policies or politics. So how do you think about Bhutan's policies related to the Gross National Happiness Index and their policy model or politics? In terms of the political leadership or wisdom of leaders, is that can be a model for you or as an indicator too?
Well, I think the only reason it can possibly run is because it's a Buddhist country and people are all used to think different set of categories than they are in Western nations. So I'm not sure that the Gross National Happiness Index is very useful. I'm not certain how it's understood by the average person. But the notion that progress is not established, created by kind of hyper development we experience, I think already a part of Bhutanese culture, although I'm sure with the younger generation, not so. Good and bad, simple.
Second question was you emphasized the importance of politics. So what do you think about the new vision or perspective in terms of the new politics from the grassroots or from young generations in the United States or around the globe? Are you optimistic or pessimistic?
I'm extremely pessimistic because my experience is young people believe in technology, that technology can solve every problem if given enough time. So, I mean, there are obviously some who don't agree with that perspective, but I find that even more common than among people over the age of 50 who have experience with the problems of technology. So I mean, I think that, and also they've been through a school system that is basically orienting them towards all of the value of modern life and losing track of the value of ancient wisdom. So I don't criticize individual youth, but that's really what they've been taught to believe, not just in the United States, but all over the world. So it's our fault as elders for having failed to educate them properly.
Is there a possibility that digitalization and technology can be merged into the scaling down vision of Ms. Hodge or new politics vision of Mr. Kopp? So digitalization, I think, is dangerous. Technology is dangerous only when it is dominated by the monopolistic global companies like as it is now. But if it can be owned and controlled by the people, would it be more efficient way to communicate and actually let people voice up for themselves instead of the traditional media?
Thank you.
I would argue that now we are obviously making use of it, and I think we need to continue to do so, but ideally with the very strong message that Clifford was voicing, the very strong message that technology is not serving us. So therefore, we do not want to encourage a further dependence on digital media. For instance, in our work in establishing local food economies, we have been encouraging direct relationships. And we are finding that structures like farmers' markets work very, very well. All the time, young people want to develop a new app or a new website to do these things. And until now, I have no evidence whatsoever that that's working better than the face-to-face contact that, for instance, farmers markets bring about. So I think we need to be very sophisticated here, because we're obviously not going to do away with all of this technology overnight. But let's try to agree on not increasing further dependence, and let's try to work very hard on raising awareness about the urgent need for democratic control of these systems. Mm-hmm. And as long as we don't have that, we have to be very nervous about becoming more dependent on it. But I'm saying, even if we imagine a world where the internet were owned and run by some kind of civic society amalgamation and structures that were genuinely defending democratic use and were clearly, as part of that, defending people's rights and the rights of nature, in a holistic way. Even if that were possible, I would argue that we would want to be doing everything we can to reduce our dependence, because these tools are not equipping us with that holistic knowledge that we need to defend and support life, the complexity of life, the richness of life, the joy, our spiritual deep connections to nature are being destroyed by this intervention of the screen. But it's also at a very practical level. We are losing so much knowledge because of our overdependence on this. So it starts with an overdependence on numbers and abstractions, and now it's moved into a digital dependence and coming back to life, and the face-to-face encounter is where the complexity and the needs of every single plant, every single animal, every single baby, the uniqueness of each and everything that lives and changing from moment to moment. That's the complexity and the richness of life. And that's the joy of life. That's the sort of spiritual awakening that's such an important part of this whole movement.
Okay, yeah, we are running out of time, so I have some questions, but I cannot do that now. So, but I guess, or I think Helena is more optimistic than the clip in terms of, because the world localization is booming, and maybe we can do that again next year or for many years in the future. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. And we live in different places and different time zones in the United States, Sacramento in California and Australia, and Seoul in Korea. But it's so good to talk like this with the same perspective. So stay healthy and hope to see you again soon. And thank you again for your wonderful presentation and remark.